My parents threw me out on the street the night I refused to hand over my $38 million inheritance. The next morning, they showed up at my grandparents' mansion with locksmiths to force me out. But when they saw who was standing beside me on that balcony, my mother's face went white as a ghost. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, the one they underestimated, this story is for you. My name is Sienna Clarke, and I'm 26 years old. I'm an art history major, the family disappointment, the one they called worthless for years. But when my grandparents died in a tragic car accident, everything changed. They left me their entire estate, $38 million. And my family lost their minds. Let me take you back to the lawyer's office, to the moment that started this war. The moment that would change everything. The moment I stopped being invisible. The air in Howard Garrett's mahogany office felt too thick to breathe. It was one of those spaces designed to intimidate, with dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books lining the walls, and a massive desk that looked like it had witnessed 1,000 family betrayals. The smell of old paper and expensive cologne hung in the air. I sat in a small leather chair in the corner, trying to make myself invisible. It was a skill I'd perfected over 26 years. My cheap polyester interview suit felt scratchy against my skin. I'd bought it at a discount store for $40, the only professional outfit I owned. The fabric was already pilling at the elbows. My shoes were scuffed black flats from Target, 2 years old and desperately needing replacement. I felt like a fraud sitting in that room. Like someone had made a clerical error and I'd been invited to the wrong meeting. My family sat in the front row like royalty waiting to claim their throne. My father, Richard Clarke, 55 years old, impatiently tapped his gold Rolex against the arm of his chair. He was a tall man with graying temples and an air of entitlement that filled every room he entered. My mother, Vivian, 54, dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. Her pearl necklace gleamed under the office lights. She was the kind of woman who performed grief like a Broadway actress, always making sure everyone was watching. My older brother, Julian, the 30-year-old golden child, was whispering to his wife, Brittany. Brittany, 29, let out an exaggerated sigh. She was a white woman who had married into our black family's perceived old money with ferocious enthusiasm. I hope this is quick, she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. We have 1 o'clock reservations at Chez Laurent. My brother patted her hand reassuringly. Don't worry, baby. This won't take long. We'll be signing papers and out of here in 20 minutes. Nobody looked at me. They never did. To them, I was the mistake, the embarrassment, the girl who wasted her life studying paintings instead of getting a real job. Howard Garrett cleared his throat. He was an elderly black man with white hair and kind eyes that had seen too much family drama. He'd been my grandparents' attorney for over 30 years. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice formal and measured. I know this is a difficult time. Thomas and Margaret Clarke were extraordinary people, and their loss is felt deeply by all of us. My mother sobbed dramatically. Julian squeezed Brittany's hand. My father's jaw tightened. Mr. Garrett opened a leather folder and pulled out several documents. The last will and testament of Thomas and Margaret Clarke is very straightforward. They were quite clear about their wishes. My father leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. I could practically see him mentally spending the money already. After several specific bequests to charity, Mr. Garrett continued, reading from the document, the entire remainder of the estate, including all financial assets, real property, and personal belongings, is bequeathed in its entirety to their granddaughter, Sienna Marie Clarke. The room went silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The kind of silence that comes right before an explosion. What? My mother gasped. Mr. Garrett looked up calmly. The estate, valued at approximately $38 million, goes entirely to Sienna. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. My parents would never cut out their own son. Mr. Garrett shook his head. There is no mistake. The will is crystal clear and legally binding. It was updated 6 months ago, witnessed by 3 independent parties, and filed properly with this office. But she's nobody. My mother shrieked, pointing at me like I was a cockroach. She's a failed art student living in a studio apartment working part-time at a coffee shop. She doesn't deserve a penny. Julian jumped to his feet. This is insane. Dad built the family business. He's the one who took care of them, not her. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else. $38 million. It didn't feel real. Mr. Garrett remained calm. Your parents were very specific about their reasoning. They included a letter to be read aloud. Would you like me to continue? Yes, I whispered. It was the first word I'd spoken since entering the office. Mr. Garrett pulled out a handwritten letter on cream-colored stationery. I recognized my grandmother's elegant cursive immediately. Tears blurred my vision. "My dearest Sienna," he read. "If you are hearing this, your grandfather and I are gone. We want you to know that this decision was not made lightly or in haste. We have watched you grow into a woman of integrity, kindness, and courage. You have stayed true to yourself even when your family mocked you for it." My mother let out an outraged gasp. The letter continued. "We know your parents and brother will be angry. They have spent years living beyond their means, borrowing against our name, expecting to inherit our wealth. But we cannot reward greed and cruelty. We cannot give our life's work to people who value money over character." My father slammed his fist on the table. "This is slander. Mr." Garrett kept reading, his voice steady. "Sienna, we are leaving you everything because we know you will use it wisely. You will honor our legacy. You have the strength to stand against your family. We believe in you. It is time to roar. With all our love, Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Thomas." The silence that followed was deafening. Then my father exploded. "This is a joke. A sick joke. That money is mine. I'm his only son. I built his business with him." "Actually, Mr." Garrett said quietly, "you didn't. Thomas Clarke built his textile business from nothing. You worked there for 7 years before being asked to leave due to embezzlement concerns." "That's a lie." My father roared. "Mr." Garrett opened another folder. "I have the internal investigation reports right here. Your father chose not to press charges out of family loyalty. But he never forgot." My mother stood up, her face twisted with rage. "Sienna, you ungrateful little brat. After everything we did for you, we raised you, fed you, clothed you. You told me I was a burden," I said quietly. "You said I ruined your life. You said I should have been aborted." "I never said that." She lied. "You said it on my 21st birthday," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "Right before you uninvited me from the family dinner because I embarrassed you by working at Starbucks." Julian stepped forward, his face contorted. "You think you're better than us now? You think you can just take our inheritance?" "It's not your inheritance, mister," Garrett said firmly. "It never was. And I suggest all of you leave now before I call security." My father turned to me, his eyes cold and calculating. "Sienna, honey," he said, his voice suddenly soft and manipulative. "I know we've had our differences, but we're family. You understand that, right? Family takes care of each other." I stared at him, this man who'd told me I was worthless my entire life. This man who forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. This man who once told me at a family dinner that I was the reason he never achieved his full potential, because raising a disappointment like me had drained all his energy. I remembered being 12 years old, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while he and my mother discussed me in the next room, not even bothering to lower their voices. "She's never going to amount to anything," my mother had said. "Maybe we should just accept that." My father had agreed. "At least we have Julian." I remembered being 16, winning a regional art competition. I'd come home so excited, clutching my first-place ribbon and a $500 scholarship check. My father had glanced at it and said, "That's nice," then gone back to watching television. My mother had said art wasn't a real achievement. Julian, who'd gotten a C+ on a history test that same week, got taken out to dinner to celebrate. I remembered being 22, graduating from college with honors. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. They said they had a charity gala to attend. Julian had just gotten fired from his 3rd job in 2 years, and they threw him a consolation party. But I also remembered my grandparents. I remembered my grandmother, Margaret, picking me up from school when I was 8 years old. She'd taken me to her favorite museum, and we'd spent hours looking at paintings. She didn't rush me. She didn't check her phone. She just held my hand and listened as I told her what I saw in each piece. "You have an artist's soul," she'd told me that day. "Don't ever let anyone take that away from you." I remembered my grandfather, Thomas, teaching me about his textile business. He was a self-made man who'd started with nothing and built an empire. He never made me feel stupid for asking questions. He never told me I should be more like Julian. When I was 24 and my car broke down, leaving me stranded and unable to get to work, my parents had said it was my own fault for buying such a cheap car. My grandfather had quietly paid for the repairs and never mentioned it again. When I was 25 and my landlord illegally raised my rent, forcing me to choose between eating and keeping a roof over my head, my parents had said I should get a real job. My grandmother had sent me grocery money every month for 6 months, until I got back on my feet. They never told my parents. They knew how my family was, and now they were gone. The memory of the phone call still made my chest tight. I'd been at work, making lattes at the coffee shop, when Mr. Garrett had called. "Miss Clarke," he'd said, his voice heavy with grief, "I have some terrible news. Your grandparents were in a car accident this morning. A truck ran a red light. They didn't survive." I dropped the phone. my manager had to take over my shift because I couldn't stop crying. You're a smart girl, he continued, his voice dripping with false concern. $38 million is a lot of responsibility. A huge burden, really. You don't know how to manage that kind of money. You've never had money. You don't understand investments, tax implications, estate management. He leaned forward, his eyes calculating behind the concerned father mask. Let me help you, he said. Sign over power of attorney to me, and I'll invest it properly. I'll make sure it grows. I'll handle all the complicated financial stuff. You won't have to worry about a thing. You'll still get an allowance, of course. An allowance. From my own money. Like I was a child who couldn't be trusted. How much? I asked quietly. What? The allowance. How much were you planning to give me? He waved his hand dismissively. We can discuss that later. The important thing is protecting the money. Your grandparents would want me to take care of it. They specifically didn't want you to take care of it, I said. That's why they left it to me. His mask slipped for just a second, and I saw the rage underneath. You're being childish, he snapped. This is about family. Family takes care of each other. You mean family that actually acts like family? I asked. Because I don't remember you taking care of me. I remember you forgetting my birthday. I remember you telling me I was a waste of space. I remember you uninviting me from Thanksgiving 3 years ago because I embarrassed you by working retail. That was different, my mother interjected, her voice sharp. You were embarrassing us. You had a college degree and you were working at Starbucks. What were we supposed to tell our friends? That your daughter was working hard to pay her bills? I suggested. That she had integrity and wasn't afraid of honest work? My mother's face twisted with contempt. Integrity doesn't pay the bills, she hissed. And look where your integrity got you. Living in a studio apartment that probably has roaches. Actually, I said, it has mice. But at least it's mine. I earned it. I didn't steal it or embezzle it, or live beyond my means hoping to inherit it. No, I said. What did you say? He asked, his mask starting to slip. I said no, this is my inheritance. My grandparents left it to me. Not you. You selfish little bitch. My mother screamed. We are your parents. You owe us everything. I owe you nothing, I said, standing up. You made my life hell. You told me I was stupid, worthless, a disappointment. You excluded me from family events. You made fun of my dreams. You treated me like garbage. That's because you were garbage. Julian shouted. Mister. Garrett stood. This meeting is over. Sienna, I need you to stay. The rest of you need to leave immediately. My father's face went from red to nearly black with rage. You haven't heard the last of this. He hissed at me. You're going to regret this. We will get what's ours. They stormed out, Brittany filming the whole thing on her phone, probably already planning how to play the victim on social media. When they were gone, Mr. Garrett sat down heavily. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I was shaking. What do I do now? First, he said, you need to understand what you've inherited. Your grandparents were very wealthy, but they were also very smart. Most of the money is in trusts that can't be easily liquidated. There's the mansion in Riverside Heights, worth about $12 million. There are investment portfolios, real estate holdings, and a significant amount of liquid cash. How much cash? I asked. About $8 million. I felt dizzy. Second, he continued, you need protection. Your family will not accept this. They will try to contest the will, they will try to manipulate you, and based on your father's tone, they may try something worse. What do you mean? I mean, I've seen this before. Desperate people do desperate things when this much money is involved. I'm going to recommend you hire a security team and a forensic accountant immediately. A forensic accountant? To trace where your father's been getting his money. Because I guarantee you, he's been borrowing against your grandparents' estate for years. The next few hours were a blur. Mr. Garrett introduced me to a security consultant named Marcus Washington, a former FBI agent who specialized in protecting high-net-worth individuals. He was a serious black man in his 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We went over everything, the death threats I might receive, the stalking, the potential for violence. It all seemed surreal. That night, I went back to my studio apartment in the city. It was a tiny 500-square-foot space in a building that should have been condemned years ago. The paint was peeling in long, sad strips. The faucet in the bathroom leaked constantly, creating a rust stain in the sink that no amount of scrubbing could remove. The windows were single-pane and drafty, making the apartment freezing in winter and sweltering in summer. My neighbors included a man who played death metal at 3 in the morning and a couple who screamed at each other so loudly I knew all their problems. I'd lived there for 3 years. The rent was $800 a month, which was actually cheap for the city, but it ate up most of my income. I worked at a coffee shop called Bean there, making $12 an hour plus tips. On good days, I brought home maybe $80. On bad days, $40. I also did freelance art consulting work when I could find it. Small galleries that needed help curating shows. Rich people who wanted someone to tell them what art to buy for their McMansions. It was sporadic and unreliable, but it helped pay for groceries. My furniture was all second-hand. A couch I'd found on Craigslist for $50, covered in a blanket to hide the mysterious stain. A card table that served as both dining table and desk. A mattress on the floor because I couldn't afford a bed frame. My dishes were mismatched pieces from thrift stores. This was my life. This was what my family mocked. But I'd built it myself. Every single piece. And there was dignity in that. I sat on my second-hand couch and cried. Not because I was sad. Because I was terrified. $38 million. My family wanted to destroy me for it. My phone started ringing. My father. I didn't answer. My mother. Ignored. Julian. Blocked. Then the text started. From my father, you have 24 hours to sign over the money, or you will regret this. From my mother. How dare you steal from your own family? You are dead to me. From Julian. Enjoy it while it lasts, you greedy bitch. From Brittany, I hope you choke on that money. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. At 3 a.m, someone started pounding on my apartment door. I jolted awake, my heart racing. Sienna. My father's voice roared. Open this door right now. I grabbed my phone and called the number Marcus had given me. He answered on the first ring. They're at my door, I whispered. Don't open it. I'm sending someone now. Stay on the line with me. My father kept pounding. You can't hide from us. That money is ours. You're nothing without us. The pounding got louder, more violent. I heard something crack. He was trying to break down the door. 5 minutes later, I heard sirens. The pounding stopped. I heard my father yelling at the police, claiming I'd stolen from him, that he was just trying to talk to his daughter. The police didn't believe him. They arrested him for attempted forced entry and harassment. The next morning, Marcus came to my apartment. You need to leave this place, he said. It's not safe. Your grandmother's mansion is sitting empty. The security system there is state-of-the-art. That's where you should be. But that will make them even angrier. They're already at maximum anger. At least there, you'll be safe. He was right. That afternoon, I moved into my grandparents' mansion. It was a massive estate in Riverside Heights, the wealthiest neighborhood in the city. The house had 8 bedrooms, a library, a ballroom, and gardens that stretched for acres. I felt like an imposter walking through those halls. That night, I lay in my old bedroom, the one with pale yellow walls and a big bay window where my grandmother used to read to me. I slept for 10 hours straight, the first real sleep I'd had in days. When I woke up the next morning, I took a long hot shower in my grandmother's bathroom, the one with heated marble floors. I put on her silk robe and went downstairs to make coffee. I was sitting in the library, looking at the security monitors when I saw them arrive. It was 8:59 a.m. 2 vehicles pulled up to the front gate. My father's black Mercedes, gleaming with arrogant self-importance, and a white windowless van with a locksmith logo on the side. My father got out wearing a crisp blue suit. My mother emerged from the passenger side, her face set in a triumphant sneer. Julian and Brittany spilled out of the back seat, Brittany already holding up her phone to film. 2 large men in work shirts got out of the van carrying heavy toolboxes and what looked like a massive crowbar. My family, here to wage war. My father strode to the intercom and pressed the buzzer. I just sipped my coffee and watched. He pressed it again, harder, jamming his thumb against it. He looked up at the house, confused. He nodded to the locksmiths. Go ahead, he ordered. The men approached the ornate iron gate and examined the high-security lock. I don't know, boss, one of them called back. This is custom, high-end, not a simple job. My father's face darkened. This was my cue. I picked up my coffee mug and walked through the library, across the grand foyer and up the wide curving staircase. At the top, I opened the double doors that led to the massive stone-covered second-floor balcony. It was right above the front entrance. The perfect stage. I stepped out into the cool morning air and looked down at them. All 5 of them, standing at my gate like an angry mob. My father in his expensive suit. My mother clutching her designer purse. Julian and Brittany looking entitled and outraged. The 2 locksmiths looking increasingly uncomfortable. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just stared up at me with a mixture of shock and fury. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Let them wait. Let them see me standing in my grandmother's silk pajamas, in my grandmother's house, drinking coffee from my grandmother's expensive china. Let them see what they lost. Good morning, I said pleasantly, my voice carrying easily across the garden. Can I help you? My mother found her voice first. Sienna Clarke, she screeched, her face going red. You get down here right this instant. I'm comfortable where I am, I said. This is ridiculous. My father roared. Open this gate right now. He tilted my head, considering. Why should I? Because I'm your father. Are you? I asked. Because fathers usually show up for their daughters. They usually remember birthdays. They usually don't embezzle from family businesses. How dare you, he hissed. How dare I what? I asked calmly. Tell the truth? Stand up for myself? Refuse to hand over my inheritance to a man who spent my entire childhood telling me I was worthless? Julian stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. You think you're so special now, he shouted. You think you're better than us. I don't think I'm better than you, I said. I think I'm different than you. I think I have something you don't have. What's that? Brittany sneered, her phone still recording everything. Integrity, I said simply. Brittany's face went purple. You sanctimonious bitch. I looked at my phone as if checking the time. You have about 3 minutes before the police arrive, I said calmly. We didn't call the police. My father sputtered. No, I said. But I did. About 10 minutes ago, when I saw you pull up with locksmiths and what appears to be breaking and entering equipment. We're not breaking in, Julian yelled. This is our house. No, I said, my voice like ice. This is my house. The deed is in my name. The will is legally binding. And you are trespassing on private property. I pointed to the multiple cameras positioned around the property. Everything you've said and done in the last 15 minutes has been recorded. The attempted forced entry. The verbal harassment. The threats. All of it. My father's face went from red to white. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to leave right now. You're going to take your locksmiths with you. And you're going to stop harassing me. And if we don't? My mother challenged. Then I'll press charges, I said. Criminal trespassing. Attempted burglary. Harassment. And I'll make sure every news outlet in the city knows that the distinguished Richard Clarke tried to steal from his own daughter. You wouldn't dare, my father said, but his voice wavered. Try me, I said. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. My father's eyes widened. Tick-tock, I said, looking at my phone again. The locksmiths were already backing toward their van. This isn't over, my father said, his voice low and menacing. Yes, it is, I said. You just don't know it yet. The police cars pulled up just as my family's Mercedes peeled away from the curb. 2 officers got out and approached the gate. I walked down from the balcony and met them at the intercom. Ma'am, are you Sienna Clarke? One of them asked. I am. You called about a disturbance? I did. But the trespassers have left. However, I'd like to file a report in case they return. I have video evidence of their attempted forced entry. The officer nodded. We'll need to see that footage. I buzzed them in. As I showed them the security footage, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't the timid girl hiding in the corner. I was the owner of this house. I was the heir to my grandparents' legacy. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Over the next 2 weeks, they tried everything. They hired lawyers to contest the will. Every lawyer told them the same thing, the will was ironclad. They tried to claim I was mentally incompetent. Mr. Garrett had me evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists. All of them declared me completely sound of mind. They tried to get the mansion condemned, filing false reports about structural damage. City inspectors came out and found nothing wrong. They called my landlord at my old apartment and told him I was a drug dealer. I'd already moved out, so it didn't matter. But the worst thing they did was go to the press. Julian gave an interview to a local news station. He sat there in an expensive suit that I knew my parents had bought for him, his arm around Brittany, looking like the perfect grieving grandson. The studio was all warm lighting and sympathetic faces. The reporter, a blonde woman in her 40s with practiced compassion in her eyes, leaned forward with concern. Julian, she said softly, tell us about your grandparents. My grandparents, he began, his voice thick with emotion, were the most wonderful people. They raised me, they taught me everything I know, they were my best friends. I'd never seen Julian spend more than 10 minutes alone with our grandparents. He'd always been too busy, too important, too focused on his own life. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when my grandmother had asked him to help her in the kitchen, he'd said he didn't do manual labor. At Christmas 2 years ago, when my grandfather had tried to show him old family photos, Julian had been on his phone the entire time. Last summer, when my grandmother had been sick with pneumonia, Julian never visited. Not once. I'd been there every day after my shift at the coffee shop, making her soup, reading to her, keeping her company. But now, on television, he was the devoted grandson. They were not in their right minds at the end, he continued, his voice breaking convincingly. They were elderly, confused, easily manipulated. My sister took advantage of that. The reporter's eyes widened. Your sister Sienna? Yes, he said, looking directly into the camera with wounded eyes. Sienna has always been troubled. She's struggled with jealousy her whole life. She couldn't handle that I was successful, and she wasn't. Successful? Julian had been fired from 6 jobs in the last 8 years. He'd been caught stealing from his employer twice. He had a gambling problem that my parents kept bailing him out of. But the reporter didn't know that. So when our grandparents were at their most vulnerable, he continued, she wormed her way into their lives. She convinced them that our parents were evil, that I was greedy, that she was the only one who truly cared. Brittany squeezed his hand supportively, her face the picture of wifely concern. This must be so hard for your parents, the reporter said. It's destroying them, Julian said. My father spent his entire life building the family business alongside my grandfather. They were partners. And now, because of Sienna's manipulation, he's been completely cut out. My mother is devastated, he added. She cared for her in-laws for decades. She was there for every holiday, every birthday, every hospital visit. And this is how she's repaid. I wanted to throw something at the television. My mother hadn't visited her in-laws unless there was a party with important people attending. She'd complained constantly about having to pretend to care about boring old people. I'd overheard her once, on the phone with a friend, saying she couldn't wait for them to die so she could finally redecorate that hideous old mansion. But Julian kept talking. All we're asking for, he said, looking earnest and reasonable, is fairness. We're not saying Sienna shouldn't get anything. We're just saying the will should be honored in spirit as well as letter. Our grandparents would have wanted the estate divided among all of us. Would they? The reporter asked. Of course, Julian said. They loved all of us equally. This will was clearly written under duress, when they were not of sound mind. We're prepared to prove that in court. I watched the interview 3 times, my hands shaking with rage. Then I called Mr. Garrett. Did you see it? I asked. I did, he said calmly. They're lying. About everything. I know. So what do? We tell the truth, he said. But we do it strategically. What does that mean? It means we don't get emotional. We don't get defensive. We present facts. Documents. Evidence. We let the evidence speak for itself. 2 days later, Mr. Manning like Wells. Garrett held his own press conference. Marcus sat beside me. Don't respond, he said. This is what they want. They want you to look defensive and guilty. But they're lying. I know. And the truth will come out. 2 days later, it did. Mr. Garrett held a press conference. He brought receipts. He showed financial records proving my father had embezzled from my grandfather's business. He showed emails where my parents discussed how to convince my grandparents to change the will in their favor. He showed text messages where Julian bragged about how he'd inherit everything. And then he dropped the biggest bomb. He revealed that my parents had been secretly borrowing money using my grandparents' name as collateral. Nearly $2 million in loans they never intended to repay. The press turned on them instantly. My phone exploded with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Some supporting me. Some furious that I was airing family business. I ignored all of them. 3 weeks after the will reading, I received an official letter. My father was suing me for defamation and demanding his share of the estate. Mr. Garrett wasn't worried. This is a desperation move, he said. They have no case. But we need to be ready. The deposition was held in a sterile conference room downtown. My father sat across from me with his lawyer, a shark-like man in an expensive suit. I had Mr. Garrett beside me and a court reporter taking down every word. My father's lawyer started with softball questions about my relationship with my grandparents. Then he went for the throat. Isn't it true, he asked, that you manipulated your elderly grandparents into changing their will? No, I said calmly. Isn't it true that you isolated them from their son, your father? No. My father isolated himself by embezzling from their business. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. You have no proof of that. Mr. Garrett slid a folder across the table. Here are the internal investigation reports, the bank statements, and the emails between Mr. Clarke and his business partner discussing how to cover it up. My father's lawyer went pale. The deposition ended badly for them. But they didn't give up. 4 weeks after the will reading, I was in the mansion's library reading when the doorbell rang. The security system chimed softly, and I pulled up the monitor. It was my mother, alone. She looked different. Small. Old. Vulnerable. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. Instead, she had on a simple navy dress, the kind she used to wear when I was a child, before money and status became her gods. Her face was bare of makeup, showing every line and wrinkle. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limply around her shoulders. She looked like the mother I remembered from early childhood, before Julian was born, when I was still the favorite. Please, she said into the intercom, her voice small and broken. Please, Sienna. I just want to talk. I stared at the monitor, my finger hovering over the button. Every instinct I had screamed not to trust her. But there was a part of me, a small wounded part, that still wanted a mother. That still remembered being 5 years old and sick with the flu, and my mother staying up all night with me, holding my hair back while I vomited, singing me lullabies. That still remembered being 7 and falling off my bike, scraping my knees bloody, and my mother scooping me up and carrying me home, kissing my forehead and telling me I was brave. Before Julian. Before everything changed. I pressed the intercom button. "What do you want?" "I want to apologize," she said, and her voice cracked. Real tears streamed down her face, catching the morning light. "I was wrong. We were all wrong. You don't have to give us the money. I just want my daughter back." I closed my eyes. God, I wanted to believe her. "I'm your mother," she sobbed, pressing her hand against the iron gate like she could reach through it and touch me. "I love you. I know I haven't shown it. I know I've been terrible. But you're my baby. My first baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. She'd called me that once. My first baby. My special girl. That was before Julian was born when I was 8 years old. Before I became the daughter who took attention away from the golden son. Before I became the inconvenient reminder of her life before she married into money. "Please," she whispered, sagging against the gate. "I'm so tired, Sienna. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of living a lie." "What lie?" I asked quietly. "That I don't need you," she said. "That I don't miss you. That I don't regret every cruel word I ever said to you." She slid down to sit on the ground, her back against the gate, looking defeated. "I was a terrible mother," she said. "I know that. I chose status over love. I chose your brother because he was easier. He never questioned me. He never challenged me. He never made me look at myself and see my failures." I felt tears on my own cheeks. "But you did," she continued. "You were so smart, so talented, so independent. You didn't need me the way Julian did. And that scared me. So I pushed you away before you could leave me. I wanted to open the gate. I wanted to run to her, to let her hold me, to pretend we could start over. But then I remembered. I remembered being 13, getting my first period at school and calling her, embarrassed and scared. She'd told me to figure it out myself, she was too busy. I'd had to ask the school nurse for help. I remembered being 15, making the honor roll every semester. Julian barely passed. But they celebrated him and ignored me. I remembered being 17, getting a full scholarship to art school. My mother had said it was a waste, that I should go to business school like Julian. I remembered being 23, calling her crying because my boyfriend had cheated on me. She'd said maybe if I was more attractive and less weird, men would treat me better. I remembered every single wound. And I knew something she didn't understand. Apologies without change are just manipulation. I pressed the intercom button again. "Do you remember my 21st birthday?" I asked. "What?" she said, looking confused. "My 21st birthday," I repeated. 5 years ago. "Do you remember what you said to me?" She shook her head. "I'd organized a small dinner," I said. "Just family. I invited you, Dad, and Julian. I made reservations at that Italian restaurant you like." I was so excited. I paused, the memory still sharp. "You called me 2 hours before and said you couldn't make it," I continued. "You said you and Dad had been invited to the Harrisons' yacht party. Important people would be there. Networking opportunities." My mother's face paled. "I asked what about Julian," I said. "You told me he was going with you because he needed to make connections for his career. Then you said, and I quote, 'Maybe if you'd chosen a real career instead of wasting your life on art, you'd be invited too.'" "I hadn't said that," she whispered. "Yes, you did," I said. "And then you hung up. I ate dinner alone at that restaurant. The waiter felt so bad for me that he gave me free dessert." My mother covered her face with her hands. "That's who you are," I said quietly. "That's who you've always been. Someone who values appearances over love. Someone who sacrifices her children on the altar of social status." "That was a long time ago," she said desperately. "I've changed." "Have you?" I asked. "Because 2 weeks ago, you called me a greedy bitch on national television. 1 week ago, you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. 3 days ago, I got a message from Aunt Carol saying you've been telling everyone I'm holding the family hostage. Those were different," she said weakly. "How?" "Because I was angry, because you took everything from us." "No," I said, my voice hard. "I didn't take anything from you. Grandma and Grandpa gave me what was theirs to give. You never had it in the first place." She stood up, and I saw the mask starting to crack. The grief was real, I realized. But not for me. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "We need that money. Your father's business is failing. We're going to lose everything." "And that's my problem. How?" I asked. "We're your parents." "You stopped being my parents years ago," I said. You became creditors waiting for an inheritance. You became strangers who happened to share my DNA. The tears were gone now, replaced by desperation. Please, she said one last time. Not even all of it. Just enough to pay off the debts. Just enough to save the house. No, I said. Goodbye, Mother. She screamed then, a raw sound of fury and loss. You selfish monster. I should have listened to the doctor when he said I should terminate you. You've ruined everything. And there it was. The truth she'd been hiding behind the tears and the apologies. I should have known. People don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are. I turned off the intercom and walked away. She stayed at the gate for another 2 hours, alternating between crying and screaming. The security cameras captured all of it. Finally, she left. I sat in my grandmother's reading chair and let myself cry, not for what I'd lost, for what I'd never had in the first place. 6 weeks after the will reading, everything came to a head. Mr. Garrett called me into his office. Hale looked grim. I've discovered something, he said. Your father's financial situation is worse than we thought. How bad? He owes over $3 million to various creditors. He's been living on credit for years, assuming he'd inherit enough to pay it all off. What happens now? He's going to declare bankruptcy. But before he does, he's going to try one more time to get your money. How? I don't know. But you need to be very careful. That night, I doubled the security around the mansion. 2 days later, my father made his move. I was working in my grandmother's art studio, a bright space filled with canvases and paint, when Marcus called. Turn on the news, he said. Channel 7. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the live stream. My father was holding a press conference. He stood in front of microphones, looking broken and humble. I want to make a public apology, he began, his voice shaking. To my daughter Sienna. I have been angry and bitter about my parents' will, but I now realize I was wrong. I stared at the screen, shocked. Sienna, he continued, looking directly into the camera, I am your father, and I love you. That's who you've always been. Someone who values appearances over love. Someone who sacrifices her children on the altar of social status. That was a long time ago, she said desperately. I've changed. Have you? I asked. Because 2 weeks ago, you called me a greedy bitch on national television. 1 week ago, you tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. 3 days ago, I got a message from Aunt Carol saying you've been telling everyone I'm holding the family hostage. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild our relationship. He actually had tears in his eyes. I have made many mistakes in my life, he said. I have been prideful and greedy. But losing my parents has made me realize what truly matters. Family. And I am begging my daughter to give me one more chance. The reporters ate it up, asking sympathetic questions about grief and family healing. I stood in the mansion's garden, surrounded by reporters, and told the truth. My father is not sorry, I began. He's broke and desperate. This public apology is a performance designed to pressure me into giving him money. I pulled out my phone and played a voicemail he'd left me just 3 days before the press conference. His voice, cold and threatening, filled the garden. You think you've won, but you haven't. I will destroy you. I will take everything from you. One way or another, that money will be mine. The reporters went silent. This is who my father really is, I said. A man who has emotionally abused me my entire life. A man who embezzled from his own father. A man who is now trying to manipulate the public into pressuring me to give him money he didn't earn and doesn't deserve. I looked directly into the cameras. I will not be giving him a single cent. And I will not be manipulated by public sympathy. My grandparents left me this inheritance because they knew my family's true nature. I'm going to honor their wishes. I walked away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions. The tide turned. Social media exploded in my support. Articles came out about toxic families and the courage it takes to set boundaries. Mental health professionals praised me for standing firm against manipulation. My father tried to do damage control, but it was too late. His credibility was destroyed. 8 weeks after the will reading, his lawsuit was dismissed. The judge called it frivolous and without merit. 10 weeks after, he declared bankruptcy. 3 months after the will reading, I sat in my grandmother's garden and realized I'd won. My family had tried everything. Legal action, public manipulation, guilt-tripping, threats. Nothing worked. The inheritance was mine. The house was mine. The future was mine. But winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. I sat there surrounded by roses my grandmother had planted, and I cried, not because I was sad, because I was grieving the family I never had. I would have given anything for parents who loved me unconditionally. For a brother who saw me as a sister instead of competition. For a family that celebrated my success instead of resenting it. But that wasn't my reality. And I had to accept that. Mr. Garrett visited me that afternoon. He brought documents, papers to sign, accounts to manage. "You're doing well," he said kindly. "Your grandparents would be proud." "I hope so," I said quietly. He pulled out one more envelope. "This is from your grandmother," he said. "She asked me to give it to you 3 months after the will reading. She wanted you to have time to process everything first." I opened it with shaking hands. "My dearest Sienna," the letter began in my grandmother's elegant handwriting. "One way or another, that money will be mine." The reporters went silent. "This is who my father really is," I said. "A man who has emotionally abused me my entire life. A man who embezzled from his own father. A man who is now trying to manipulate the public into pressuring me to give him money he didn't earn and doesn't deserve." I looked directly into the cameras. "I will not be giving him a single cent. And I will not be manipulated by public sympathy. My grandparents left me this inheritance because they knew my family's true nature. I'm going to honor their wishes." I walked away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions. The tide turned. Social media exploded in my support. Articles came out about toxic families and the courage it takes to set boundaries. Mental health professionals praised me for standing firm against manipulation. My father tried to do damage control, but it was too late. His credibility was destroyed. If you are reading this, you have survived the storm. I knew it would be hard. I knew your family would fight you. But I also knew you were strong enough to withstand it. You are not like them, sweet girl. You have integrity. You have kindness. You have the courage to stay true to yourself even when the whole world tells you to compromise. I left you this money not just as a gift but as a responsibility. Use it wisely. Use it to help others. Use it to build the life you deserve. I paid off the $2 million in loans my father had taken out in my grandparents' names, protecting their reputation and credit. My father and mother lost their house. They now live in a small rented apartment across town. My mother calls relatives constantly, complaining about her cruel, ungrateful daughter. Most of them have stopped taking her calls. Julian completed a court-ordered rehab program for substance abuse. He now works the night shift at a gas station. Brittany divorced him and tried to sue me for emotional distress damages. The case was thrown out in less than 10 minutes. I stand on the balcony of my grandparents' mansion, looking out at the garden party below. Young painters, sculptors, dancers, and musicians laugh and dream together. "Mr. Garrett stands beside me, a glass of champagne in his hand. Your grandparents would be so proud," he says again. I think about the black ledger Mr. Garrett showed me months ago, filled with evidence of my father's crimes. I think about the $38 million now working to change lives. My revenge was never about the money, I realize. It wasn't even about the house. My revenge was protecting the legacy. My grandparents believed in integrity and truth. My family tried to poison that legacy with greed and lies. I didn't just save the money. I saved their names. I think about my grandmother's last words. "It is time to roar." I look out at the young artists flourishing in this house built on truth and love. I smile. I roared. And finally, the whole world is listening. The lesson from this story is simple but powerful. Your worth is never defined by those who try to diminish you. My family saw me as worthless, but my grandparents recognized my true integrity. They didn't just leave me money as a shield. They left me the truth as a sword. This story proves that bullies, even in your own family, only hold the power you allow them to have. True strength isn't inheriting a fortune. It's finding the courage to expose painful reality, reclaim your own narrative, and use that power to protect the legacy of those who truly loved you. Have you ever had to stand up to your own family? Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well and proving them all wrong. Thank you for listening.